The silence in the engineering bay lasted only a heartbeat before it shattered into chaos. Station security forces finally arrived, pouring through multiple access points with weapons raised and demands for surrender echoing off the metal walls. Korath warriors tensed for another fight until Yuna stepped forward, with her hands visible and her lightsaber still clipped to her belt. "Stand down," she called out. "The threat has been neutralized." The security commander, a four-armed Talatsian with silver scales, approached cautiously and surveyed the carnage of disabled mercenaries and exhausted warriors. "Captain Park?" he asked, recognizing her uniform. "The bomb at the reactor base has been deactivated," she reported. "You will find Syndicate of Silent Moons operatives throughout the station, and they were attempting to assassinate both the human and Korath delegations to start a war." The Talaxian's eyes widened as he processed the implications. A false flag operation of this scale would have destabilized half the quadrant. That was their intention. Varn Desak stepped forward, his armor scored with blast marks and his scales showing the dark stains of his own blood. "The human speaks truth," he confirmed. "Without Captain Park's intervention, both delegations would have died, and our species would now be preparing for war." More security officers spread through the bay, securing prisoners and checking wounded. Medical teams arrived moments later and immediately moved toward the most seriously injured. A medic approached Yuna and grimaced at the blood soaking through her uniform. "Captain, you need immediate treatment." "Others first," Yuna replied, gesturing toward a Korath warrior whose leg armor had been completely destroyed by energy fire. The medic started to argue, but something in Yuna's eyes stopped him. He moved to help the Korath. Instead, Saris stood frozen where Yuna had left her, her compound eyes tracking every movement as if expecting someone to execute her at any moment. Ambassador Chun approached the Velothi carefully, keeping his hands visible and his posture non-threatening. "You saved thousands of lives today," he said gently. "I betrayed my employers," Saris replied flatly. "My daughter will pay for my weakness." "Your daughter will be protected," Chun assured her. "I am invoking emergency diplomatic authority to grant you provisional asylum under Terran law, and I will personally contact our intelligence services about locating and extracting Pela." "You would do this for an enemy?" Chen smiled, the same patient smile he had worn during the failed negotiations. "You stopped being an enemy the moment you chose your daughter over destruction." The next several hours blurred together in a haze of medical treatment and security debriefs and diplomatic communications. Yuna submitted to examination only after every other wounded person had been treated. And even then she answered questions while doctors sealed her wounds with regenerative patches. Her cracked ribs would heal within a week thanks to human medical technology. The shoulder graze and sideburn would leave scars. But she had collected worse souvenirs from less important missions when she finally emerged from the medical bay. She found Von Desak waiting in the corridor. The Korath security chief had also been treated, though his natural armor had protected him from the worst of the fighting. "The Dominion voice wishes to speak with you." Varn announced. Yuna followed him to a private observation lounge where Kreth Valarak stood before a massive window overlooking the stars. The station had been moved to a higher security position, and repair crews already swarmed the damaged sections. "Captain Park." Kreth greeted her without turning from the view. Dominion voice. She replied, "I have served the Korath throne for 40 cycles." Kreth said slowly, "I have witnessed battles that would fill 100 songs, and I have seen warriors whose names will echo through eternity." He turned to face her. "But I have never seen anything like what you did today." Yuna remained silent, unsure how to respond. "My people have always believed that strength comes from size and armor and natural weapons," Kreth continued. "We looked at humans and saw small, soft creatures who needed tools to survive. Many species see us that way." Yuna acknowledged. "We were fools." Kreth reached into his robes and withdrew a small object that glinted gold in the starlight. "This is the Claw of Honored Alliance," he explained. "It has not been given to an outsider in 3,000 years of Korath history." He pressed the golden claw into Yuna's hand. "You earned this with blood and courage, and something my people do not have a word for." "What's something?" Yuna asked. "The ability to save an enemy by offering understanding instead of violence," Kreth replied. "The Velothi technician would have died before surrendering to Korath interrogation. But you reached her with words we would never have thought to speak." Yuna looked at the golden claw in her palm. "I just talked to her like a person." "Exactly," Varn spoke up. "And that is something we are still learning how to do." Ambassador Chun arrived at the lounge with news that communications had been restored, and both governments had been informed of the Syndicate's attack. The response from both sides had been immediate and unified. The Korath Dominion has proposed something unprecedented, Chun announced with barely contained excitement. "Instead of the trade agreement we originally discussed, they want to negotiate a full mutual defense pact." Yuna blinked in surprise. "A military alliance? After one day?" "Not just military," Kreth corrected. "Cultural exchange, technological cooperation, and combined training programs." He looked at Yuna's lightsaber. "Specifically, we wish to learn whether Korath can master your impossible weapon." "The training is brutal," Yuna warned. "Most candidates wash out within the first year. Then we will begin with our most stubborn warriors," Varn said with something approaching humor. "Korath do not accept failure any more than humans accept impossibility." The next morning, as repair crews finished sealing the last hull breaches and security forces completed their sweep for remaining Syndicate operatives, Yuna stood alone on the main observation deck. Her wounds ached despite the medication, and her muscles screamed for rest. But she needed a moment of quiet before the diplomatic circus resumed. Footsteps approached behind her. Small and hesitant, she turned to find a group of young Korath gathered near the entrance. Their scales still bright with youth and their eyes wide with curiosity. "Forgive us, Honored Blade," the tallest of them said, using a title Yuna had never heard before. "We wish to see you before our delegation departs." "Why?" The young Korath exchanged glances. "The stories say you fight with captured starlight," another offered. "Is this true?" Yuna smiled and unclipped her lightsaber from her belt. She did not ignite it, but held it out so they could see the simple cylinder that held such power. "It is not captured," she told them. "We learned how to create it ourselves. But the energy inside," the tallest insisted, "it glows like a star, because humans learned to make their own stars," Yuna explained. "We found technology that everyone said was too difficult. And we decided that too difficult just meant we needed to work harder." The young Korath stared at the cylinder with something approaching reverence. "Could we learn?" One asked quietly. "Anyone can learn," Yuna assured them. "The only question is whether you are willing to fail 1,000 times before you succeed." She looked out at the stars beyond the window. "That is what makes humans different. I think, not that we are stronger or smarter or more advanced than other species." "Then what?" the tallest asked. "We do not know how to give up," Yuna said simply. "We look at impossible things, and we reach for them anyway, because we believe that nothing stays impossible forever if you keep trying." She clipped the lightsaber back to her belt, where it hung like an ordinary cylinder of metal. Just a tool, just a toy until it ignited, and reminded everyone watching that humans carried stars in their pockets and refused to let the darkness win. The blast doors groaned as Korath warriors drove their claws into the seams and pulled with all their considerable strength. Metal screamed against metal, and sparks flew from stressed hinges until finally the doors buckled inward with a crash that echoed through the engineering section. Yuna was through the opening before the dust settled. The engineering bay stretched before her like a cathedral of machinery, with towering power conduits reaching toward the ceiling and walkways crossing the space at multiple levels. The station's reactor hummed at the center of it all, a contained star providing energy to keep thousands of beings alive. The bomb sat at the base of the reactor, a black device covered in blinking lights and wired directly into the main power feed. 20 Syndicate mercenaries held positions throughout the bay, their weapons already tracking the breach point. But they had expected Karth to lead the assault, and they had positioned themselves to counter large, slow targets. They had not expected Yuna. She leaped from the doorway to the nearest support column, using it as cover, while her lightsaber deflected the first volley of projectiles behind her. The Korath poured through the breach with roars that shook the reactor. Housing the mercenaries split their fire between the charging reptilian warriors and the dancing human who seemed to appear and disappear between. Shadows Varn Desak led his warriors like a force of nature, his curved blade sweeping aside any mercenary foolish enough to stand before him. His natural armor absorbed hits that would have killed an unprotected human, and his claws found gaps in enemy defenses with predatory precision. But even Karth could not ignore concentrated fire forever. One warrior fell with a cry as energy bolts burned through his leg armor. Another staggered back as projectiles cracked his chest plates. The mercenaries were elite troops, well-trained and well-equipped, and they began coordinating their attacks to maximize damage. Against the larger targets, Yuna saw the tide beginning to turn and made a decision. She abandoned her careful approach and charged directly toward the densest cluster of enemies, her blade singing through the air as she closed the distance. 3 mercenaries turned their weapons on her, and she felt projectiles passing close enough to tug at her uniform. One grazed her shoulder, and pain flared bright and hot, but she did not slow. She reached the first mercenary and cut low, taking his legs from under him. The second tried to use his rifle as a club, and she ducked beneath the swing before driving her elbow into his throat. The third managed to fire once more before her blade removed his weapon and the hand holding it. "Push forward!" She shouted to the Karth Varn, responded by lifting a mercenary bodily and throwing him into 2 of his companions. The Korath warriors followed his example, using their size advantage to create chaos in the enemy formation, while Yuna exploited every opening they created. The battle became a brutal dance of scales and steel and plasma light. Yuna lost track of how many enemies she disabled, her consciousness narrowing to the pure flow of combat instinct. She felt a blade slice across her ribs and ignored it. She felt her muscles screaming from exertion and pushed harder. She felt blood running down her arm from the shoulder wound and used it to strengthen her grip on her lightsaber. A massive Syndicate enforcer blocked her path to the bomb, his armor heavier than standard, and his weapon a custom energy cannon designed to punch through ship hulls. "You die here, human," he growled. Yuna did not waste breath on a response. She attacked with a combination that would have killed a normal opponent in the first 3 moves. But the enforcer's armor absorbed her strikes, and his cannon tracked her movements with surprising speed. A blast caught her in the side, and she felt ribs crack as she tumbled across the floor. The enforcer advanced, confident in his victory. Varn Desak appeared behind him. The Korath security chief drove his curved blade through a gap in the enforcer's armor at the neck joint, and the massive man collapsed without a sound. Varn extended a clawed hand to Yuna. "You fight well for someone so small," he said. "You arrived just in time for someone so large," she replied, taking his hand and letting him pull her upright. Pain lanced through her side, but she forced herself to breathe through it. The bomb's countdown showed 4 minutes remaining. Only a handful of mercenaries remained active. and the Korath were systematically eliminating them with prejudice. But between Yuna and the device stood the last obstacle she had hoped to avoid. A slender figure in technical gear knelt beside the bomb, her fingers dancing across a control pad. The Velothi female looked up at Yuna's approach, and her compound eyes reflected the blue glow of the lightsaber. "Stay back," Saris warned, "or I accelerate the countdown and we all die right now." Yuna stopped 3 meters from the bomb. "You do not want to die," she said. "What I want is irrelevant," Saris replied. "The Syndicate paid for this outcome, and the Syndicate will have it. The Syndicate sent you on a suicide mission. All missions are suicide missions when you owe the Syndicate enough money." Yuna studied the Velothi's face and saw something familiar beneath the bravado fear. Yes, but also exhaustion. The look of someone who had been running for so long they had forgotten why they started. "What is your debt?" Yuna asked. Saris laughed bitterly. "More than I could repay in 10 lifetimes. And they own everything I care about until I clear it." "Family?" The Velothi's compound eyes flickered. "A daughter. And she will grow up free of debt if I complete this mission." The countdown reached 3 minutes around them. The last mercenaries fell to Korath blades. And suddenly, the engineering bay was quiet, except for the hum of the reactor and the beeping of the bomb. "What is your daughter's name?" Yuna asked softly. Saris hesitated. "Why do you care?" "Because I am about to ask you to trust me. And trust begins with names." The Velothi stared at her for a long moment. "Pela," she finally answered. "Her name is Pela, and she is 7 years old." Yuna deactivated her lightsaber and clipped it to her belt. Varn hissed in alarm behind her. "What are you doing?" he demanded, showing trust. Yuna replied without looking back. She took a step closer to Saris. "I cannot promise that the Syndicate will release your daughter, because I do not control them, and I will not lie to you." "Then, what can you offer?" Saris asked. "I can offer you something the Syndicate never will," Yuna said. "I can offer you a chance to be the mother Pela deserves. You think pretty words will make me betray my employers? I think you already want to betray them. I think you have been looking for a reason to stop running ever since they first put a collar around your neck." The countdown reached 2 minutes. "Thousands of people on this station," Yuna continued. "Families and children and beings who never did anything to the Syndicate or to you. And you are the only one who can save them. And if I do, the Syndicate will kill me and my daughter both." "Maybe," Yuna admitted. "Or maybe the Terran government will grant you asylum and protection in exchange for information about Syndicate operations." She held out her hand. "I cannot guarantee Pela's safety if you help us, but I can guarantee she becomes an orphan if you do not." Saris looked at the bomb, then at Yuna's extended hand. The countdown reached 90 seconds. "Her favorite color is blue," Saris whispered. "She always said she wanted to touch a star someday." She took Yuna's hand. "Tell me the code." Yuna said gently. Saris spoke 7 characters in a voice that trembled with hope and terror. Combined, Yuna entered them into the bomb's control pad. The countdown stopped at 43 seconds. The emergency lighting cast red shadows across the corridors as Yuna led the combined human and Korath force toward the engineering section. Her lightsaber remained ignited, its blue glow cutting through the crimson darkness like a beacon of defiance against the chaos consuming the station. Varn Desok moved beside her, his massive frame barely fitting through doorways designed for smaller species. The other Korath warriors had recovered from the sonic assault, though their movements showed lingering pain in how they held their heads tilted away from sudden sounds. "How did you do that?" Varn asked as they advanced through an empty cargo bay. "Do what?" "Move like that, and fight like that, and throw your weapon and have it return to your hand." Yuna checked a corner before signaling the others to continue training. She answered simply, "No amount of training explains what I witnessed." Varn insisted, "I have fought in 17 campaigns across 6 star systems. And I have never seen anything like you. Ambassador Chun spoke up from his position in the middle of their formation, protected by Karth warriors on all sides. The plasma blade technology was discovered in ruins on a dead world at the edge of explored space. He explained, ancient aliens had developed it thousands of years before any current species achieved spaceflight. Many species attempted to adapt the technology after humanity shared the discovery. Yuna added, but most gave up within a decade. Varn frowned with his reptilian features. Why would they abandon such a powerful weapon? Because it requires neural synchronization implants that take 2 years to properly integrate with the user's nervous system. Yuna replied, and because the training regimen demands 8 hours daily for a minimum of 5 years before a wielder can survive actual combat, and because the psychological conditioning to remain calm while fighting at close range against projectile weapons breaks most candidates within the first year. Ambassador Chun added Varn processed this information as they moved through a maintenance tunnel. Other species considered this price too high. They thought it was impractical. Yuna confirmed. They calculated that the resources spent training one blade wielder could produce dozens of soldiers with conventional weapons. But humans did not make this calculation. Yuna paused at an intersection and listened before choosing a left passage. Humans looked at an impossible technology and decided that impossible was just another word for challenging. They encountered their next obstacle 3 corridors from engineering. A squad of syndicate mercenaries had established a defensive position behind makeshift barricades. Their weapons trained on the only approach route. Yuna held up her hand to stop the group and studied the enemy formation. 12 hostiles, she reported. 4 with projectile weapons, 4 with energy rifles, and 4 with those sonic disruptors. Dominion voice Kreth growled low in his throat. We cannot withstand another sonic assault. And my warriors are still weakened from the first. You will not have to withstand it, Yuna said. She turned to Varn and pointed at a ventilation shaft above their heads. Can your warriors fit through the maintenance ducts? Varn looked at the shaft and then at his own broad shoulders. It would be tight, but possible. Take 4 warriors through the ducts and position yourselves behind their line and wait for my signal. What signal? Yuna smiled. You will know it when you see it. Varn wanted to argue, his pride still struggling against the reality that a human was giving him orders, but he had seen what she could do. And survival mattered more than pride. He selected 4 warriors and disappeared into the ventilation system with surprising stealth for creatures so large. Yuna waited 3 minutes by her internal count, then stepped into the corridor and began walking toward the barricade. What is she doing? Dominion voice Kreth demanded. Ambassador Chun could only shake his head. I stopped trying to predict. Captain Park years ago. The syndicate mercenaries spotted her immediately, and their commander laughed at the sight of a single small human approaching their position. Stand down and surrender, he called out, and we might let you live long enough to be ransomed. Yuna continued walking, her lightsaber held low at her side, its blue glow reflecting off the metal walls. I have a counteroffer, she replied. Drop your weapons and tell me the deactivation code for the bomb you planted in engineering, and I will let you live. The mercenaries laughed, and their commander raised his weapon. Killer. 12 weapons fired simultaneously. Yuna moved. Her blade became a shield of light, spinning and twisting in patterns that seemed to bend physics itself. Projectiles vaporized against plasma. Energy bolts deflected into walls and ceiling. And she kept walking forward through the storm of fire as if strolling through gentle rain. The mercenaries stopped laughing. They stopped firing too, their weapons overheating from sustained discharge. And in that moment of silence, Yuna gave her signal. She threw her lightsaber straight up, and it carved through the ceiling panels above the barricade before spinning back to her hand. Varn and his warriors dropped through the hole she had created. landing among the mercenaries with roars that shook the corridor. The fight lasted 11 seconds. Korath claws and Korath strength tore through the mercenary squad, while Yuna prevented any escape from the front. When it ended, the Syndicate commander knelt before her with Varn's claws wrapped around his throat. "The code," Yuna said calmly. "I do not know it." The commander spat. "Only the technician who set the bomb knows the deactivation sequence." "Then your life has no value to me." She turned and walked away, and Varn began squeezing. "Wait," the commander choked out. "The technician is a Velothi female named Saris, and she's in engineering guarding the device." "How many guards with her?" 20 of our best. And they have orders to ensure the bomb detonates, even if the rest of us fail." Yuna nodded and continued walking behind her. She heard Varn release the commander and knock him unconscious with a single blow. "You would have let me kill him?" Varn asked as he caught up to her. "I would have let you make your own choice." Yuna replied. "That is what warriors do." Varn studied her with new respect in his amber eyes. "My people have stories about ancient heroes who fought with nothing but skill and will against overwhelming odds." He said, "We thought they were legends exaggerated by time. Maybe they were just humans." Yuna suggested. They reached the engineering section's main entrance and found it sealed with heavy blast doors. The bomb's countdown showed 19 minutes remaining on the display panel. 20 elite mercenaries behind those doors. Ambassador Chun said quietly, "Even with Captain Park's abilities, those odds are severe." Yuna deactivated her lightsaber and turned to face the combined group. "I cannot do this alone," she admitted. "I need Korath's strength to breach those doors and Korath's ferocity to keep the mercenaries occupied while I reach the bomb." Varn straightened to his full height and drew the massive curved blade from his back. "You will have more than that, human, and you will have Korath honor fighting beside you." The other warriors drew their weapons, and even Dominion Voice Kreth pulled a ceremonial dagger from his robes. "For the first time in my memory," Kreth announced, "Korath and human will shed blood together as allies." Yuna ignited her lightsaber, and its blue light mixed with the red emergency glow to create something new, something that looked almost purple, almost like hope. "Then let us go save a space station," she said. The darkness swallowed everything, and for 3 heartbeats, the only sounds were the screaming alarms and the distant thunder of weapons fire. Yuna dropped into a crouch and pulled Ambassador Chun down beside her, shielding his body with her own, while her eyes fought to adjust to the blackness. The Korath had no such problem. Their amber eyes glowed brighter in the dark. And Varn Dezok barked orders in his native tongue that sent the warriors moving into a defensive circle around. Dominion Voice Kreth, "Stay behind us." "Little humans," Varn commanded with contempt still present even in crisis. "Try not to get stepped on while real warriors handle whatever this is." Yuna ignored him and pressed her earpiece deeper into her ear canal station security. "This is Captain Park with the Terran delegation. Requesting status report." Static answered her. "Communications are jammed," she announced to Ambassador Chun. "This is not a malfunction or an accident. What do you think it is?" Chun whispered. "An attack planned by someone who knew both delegations would be here." Varn snorted in the darkness. "Impossible." And this meeting was kept secret from all but the highest levels of both governments. Then someone at the highest levels wanted us dead. Yuna replied flatly. The sound of boots pounding against metal grew louder, coming from multiple corridors at once, and Yuna counted at least 3 separate groups converging. On their position, she stood and positioned herself between the approaching sounds and Ambassador Chun. "Get behind the Korath." "Formation," she ordered him. "What about you?" "I need room to work." The first attackers rounded the corner, and they wore black armor without any insignia or identification. They carried weapons Yuna recognized immediately as sonic disruptors. military-grade devices designed to overwhelm Korath's sensory organs with frequencies that would rupture their eardrums. Someone had planned this carefully. Someone who knew exactly who would be here and how to hurt them. The disruptors activated with a high-pitched whine that made Yuna wince. But the effect on the Korath was devastating. Varn the Sock roared in agony and dropped to his knees. His claws pressed against the sides of his head. The other warriors collapsed around him, their massive bodies crashing to the floor as the sonic assault tore through their enhanced hearing. Only Dominion Voice Kreth remained standing, his teeth bared in pain but his pride refusing to let him fall. The attackers advanced with confidence, raising projectile weapons to finish what the disruptors had started. Yuna stepped into their path. Her thumb found the activation switch on her cylinder, and she pressed it. The corridor exploded with light. A blade of light of brilliant blue plasma erupted from the hilt with a sound like a thunderclap, followed by a deep humming that seemed to vibrate in the bones of everyone present. The light illuminated everything, casting sharp shadows and revealing the faces of the attackers who had frozen in shock at the sight. Yuna moved. She did not run or charge or make any of the dramatic movements that entertainment programs showed. She flowed. 12 years of training had burned the combat forms into her muscles until they required no conscious thought. The first attacker raised his weapon, and Yuna was simply there, her blade sweeping upward through the barrel of his gun before continuing in a circle that ended with her elbow striking his throat. He dropped without firing a shot. The second attacker managed to pull his trigger, but Yuna had already shifted her weight and angled her blade. The projectile struck plasma and vaporized, and her counterstrike removed his weapon hand at the wrist. She did not pause to watch him fall. The third attacker tried to retreat, and Yuna let him take 2 steps before she closed the distance and drove her knee into his stomach as he doubled over. She brought the pommel of her lightsaber down on the back of his skull. 4 seconds had passed since she ignited her blade. 3 attackers were down. The rest of the squad hesitated, and that hesitation cost them everything. Yuna pressed her attack with relentless precision, her blade a blur of blue light that carved through weapons and armor with equal ease. She did not kill unless necessary, but she disabled with brutal efficiency. A hand here, a knee there, a shoulder joint severed to prevent a weapon from ever being raised again. The sonic disruptors stopped their assault as the operators fell, and the Korath began recovering from their stupor. Von Desok pushed himself upright and watched with eyes that could not believe what they witnessed. This tiny human female moved through trained killers like wind through tall grass. She anticipated attacks before they came and exploited weaknesses that should have been invisible. Her blade left trails of light in the air that seemed to paint beautiful and terrible patterns against the darkness. The last attacker turned to run, and Yuna threw her lightsaber. It spun end over end in a perfect arc, struck the fleeing man in the back of the head with its pommel, and returned to her waiting hand as if pulled by an invisible string. The corridor fell silent, except for the groans of wounded attackers and the steady hum of her blade. Yuna turned to face the Korath, and for the first time since the meeting began, no one was laughing at her. "More will come," she said calmly. "These were just the first wave meant to disable your warriors and eliminate the easy targets." Vaughn stared at her as if seeing a completely different creature than the one he had mocked hours earlier. "What are you?" he asked. "I am a human," Yuna replied, "and we do not give up on things just because they seem impractical." She knelt beside one of the wounded attackers and searched his armor until she found Communicator. The symbol on its casing made her blood run cold. "Syndicate of Silent Moons," she announced. "Dominion." Voice Kreth hissed with recognition. "Criminal scavengers who profit from war between other species. They wanted us to kill each other." Ambassador Chun realized If both delegations died here, each side would blame the other. Korath and Human would go to war, Varn finished the thought. And the Syndicate would sell weapons to both sides. Una stood and pointed her blade toward the deeper sections of the station. This is not over. And they would not risk an operation this large without a guarantee of success. She accessed the wounded attacker's communicator and listened to the chatter between Syndicate units. What she heard made her stomach drop. They have rigged the station reactor, she announced. If we do not reach engineering and stop them, everyone on Valeth Crossing dies in approximately 30 minutes. Varn looked at his recovering warriors. Then back at the small human with her impossible weapon, his pride warred with his survival instincts for only a moment. What do you need from us? He asked. Una smiled, and it was not a kind expression. I need you to trust me. And I need you to keep up. She began moving toward the engineering section, a lightsaber lighting the way, and for the first time in recorded history, Korath warriors followed a human into battle. The trading station called Valeth Crossing floated in the darkness between 3 star systems, and it served as neutral ground for species who could not trust each other enough to meet anywhere else. Captain Una Park stood at attention near the airlock doors. Her black uniform pressed and perfect, her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun, and her eyes scanning every shadow in the docking corridor. She had served in the Terran Diplomatic Security Corps for 12 years, and she had protected ambassadors on 17 different worlds. But something about this assignment made her stomach tight with worry. The Korath Dominion had requested this meeting, and the Korath never requested anything without a hidden purpose. Ambassador Chen Wei walked up beside her and adjusted his formal robes with nervous fingers. How do I look? He asked in a whisper, like a man about to negotiate with lizards who could bite his head off. Una replied without moving her lips. Chen let out a small laugh, despite his anxiety. Thank you for the confidence boost. Captain, I am here to protect you, Ambassador, not to make you feel comfortable about walking into danger. The airlock hissed and began its cycling sequence, and Una felt her hand drift toward the cylinder hanging from her belt before she caught herself and forced her arm to relax. The Korath delegation entered the corridor, and Una had to fight to keep her expression neutral. She had read the briefings and studied the images, but nothing prepared her for seeing them in person. The Korath stood nearly 3 meters tall, their bodies covered in natural bone armor that grew from their green-scaled skin like plates of living shield. Their heads resembled ancient earth dragons, with elongated snouts filled with teeth and eyes that glowed amber in the station lighting. Each of them carried massive curved blades strapped to their backs, and their claws clicked against the metal floor with every step. The leader of the delegation stepped forward, and his armor bore golden markings that indicated high rank. Behind him came 6 Korath warriors and a slightly smaller male who wore the red sash of a security commander. I am Dominion Voice Kreth Valorax, the leader announced, his voice rumbling like distant thunder, and I speak with the authority of the Korath throne. Ambassador Chun bowed respectfully and introduced himself and his small delegation. Una noticed that the Korath security commander had fixed his amber eyes on her and had not looked away. His snout curled in what she recognized as amusement. I am Varn the Sock, the security commander said, stepping closer to examine Una like she was an interesting insect. And I am responsible for protecting the Dominion Voice. He towered over her by more than a meter, and his shadow swallowed her completely. Captain Una Park, she replied calmly. Terran Diplomatic Security Corps. Varn let out a barking laugh that made the other Korath warriors join in. This is what humans send to protect their ambassadors. He asked the air around him. A female barely larger than our younglings? He reached down and flicked the cylinder on her belt with one massive claw. And what is this decoration? A toy for when she gets bored during the talking? The Korath warriors laughed harder, and even Dominion voice Kreth seemed amused. Yuna did not react, and her face remained as still as carved stone. It is a tool, she said simply, a tool. Varn repeated with mockery dripping from every syllable. Perhaps you use it to open food containers? Or to scratch hard to reach places on your soft little bodies. Ambassador Chun cleared his throat and gestured toward the conference wing. Perhaps we should proceed to the negotiations, he suggested with diplomatic smoothness. I understand the Dominion voice has concerns about the Helian trade corridor. The Korath leader grunted agreement and began walking, his massive frame forcing the humans to scatter from his path. Yuna fell into step behind her ambassador, and she felt Varn Desok watching her back with those glowing eyes. The conference room had been designed for species of varying sizes, with adjustable seating and multiple atmospheric options. The Korath chose to stand, which forced the humans to crane their necks upward during the entire conversation. Dominion voice Kreth wasted no time on pleasantries. Human vessels have been traveling through Kara space without permission, he growled. Your merchants use the Helian corridor as if they own it, and your military patrols have been spotted near our colony worlds. Ambassador Chun maintained his patient smile. The Helian corridor was designated as neutral passage space by the Galactic Commerce Accord, he replied. All signatory species have the right to travel through it. The Korath did not sign your accord, Kreth snapped. We do not recognize agreements made by weaker species, trying to restrict superior ones. The negotiations continued in this manner for hours, with the Korath making demands and Ambassador Chun carefully explaining why humanity could not accept them. Yuna stood motionless by the door, watching everything and everyone, her training keeping her alert. Despite the tedium, she noticed small things that the others missed. She saw how the station staff seemed nervous beyond normal levels. She observed that certain security checkpoints had fewer guards than the station manifest indicated. She caught the flicker of a shadow in a maintenance corridor that moved against the direction of foot traffic. Something was wrong, and her instincts screamed warnings that she could not yet prove. During a brief recess, she approached Ambassador Chun while he sipped water in the corner. We need to leave, she said quietly. Chun frowned at her. The negotiations are going poorly, but we cannot simply abandon them. Someone is watching us, Yuna insisted. And not just the Korath. This station has thousands of beings on it, Captain, and many of them are probably curious about the human Korath meeting. This is different, and I cannot explain how I know, but something bad is coming. Before Chun could respond, Varn Desok appeared beside them with a cruel grin on his reptilian face. Is the little human female frightened? He asked with fake concern. Perhaps she should wait on your ship where it is safe while the adults continue their important business. Yuna looked up at him without fear. Perhaps you should pay more attention to your surroundings instead of mocking people half your size. Varn leaned down until his snout was centimeters from her face, and his breath smelled like copper and raw meat. If there was danger here, little human, I would smell it before you could blink those tiny eyes. The station lights flickered once, then twice, then died completely, plunging the conference wing into absolute darkness. Alarms began screaming through the corridors, and Yuna heard the unmistakable sound of weapons fire echoing from somewhere in the station. She reached for her belt and wrapped her fingers around the cylinder that Varn had called a toy. The Korath might have better natural weapons, superior size, and armor grown from their own bodies, but Unipark had something they could not understand. She had 12 years of training with a weapon that most species considered too impractical to master. She had a blade made of captured light, and she was about to show everyone in this station Exactly why humans never gave up on impractical things.